Okay, we are live and welcome to another edition of HDPR Live. I'm your host, Jamie Irvin. Today, I want to talk about the rise of e-commerce and the impact it's going to have on the heavy-duty parts industry. This is something that we have been talking a lot about recently. Today, I attended a webinar that was put on by GENALPHA and MacKay and Company. This joint webinar that they put on was really talking about the e-commerce platform that GenAlpha is developing and the way that they interact and work with manufacturers who want to have an e-commerce platform that's more B2B than B2C. But regardless of where you are in the distribution chain, there is the understanding that e-commerce is going to grow and grow and grow within our industry in the next 10 years. And I wanted to share some of the highlights of this great webinar with you. And I also wanted to add my comments on where I think things are going. So if you buy or sell heavy duty parts, this live broadcast is for you. And I encourage you to listen in. Now, I'm going to be looking at a few slides here and just sharing some of the information with you. If you'd ever like to get any of this information, you can reach out directly to me, jamie@jamieirvin.ca, and I can share some of the info. But of course, this is their content, not mine. So I would never want to impose or share something that I'm not entitled to share. But I will give you my impressions of the information that they shared with us today. So first of all, how big is the heavy duty trucking and trailer industry? How big is the parts industry? Well, they started off by giving us a snapshot of where we are as an industry. So according to MacKay and Company, there are 6 million trailers on the road today, 2.2 million medium duty trucks, and 3.5 million heavy duty trucks. So I'm just going to focus in on heavy duty trucks and trailers. That's 9.5 million combined vehicles on the roads today. And when you break down the aftermarket, you can really break it into three categories. So you have hard parts, that makes up $31.6 billion in sales. You have lubricants, that's 5.6 billion. And you've got tires coming in at 11.4 billion. And notice too that the DEF products, the actual after treatment, is embedded in that lubricant category. So this is how they started the webinar off. They kind of gave us this high level overview of the industry. These numbers seem to be in line with everything that I have looked at and seen, and it gives you an idea of the scope of our industry. Now, let's move on here. So there's a couple other things that I wanted to talk about before we really get into it. And when they surveyed a bunch of fleets, and when I say a bunch, I mean over 800, they got a breakdown of kind of where fleets are, how much each kind of fleet makes up the total industry. And there was a couple little interesting things that kind of really jumped out at me. So when you look at a fleet by size, there's a lot of small fleets in the world. 28% of fleets are between 1 and 9 units, a full 28%. And the next largest size actually is between 100 and 500. That makes up 25%. Well, actually, to be very specific, it's 100 and 499. So if you have between 100 and 499 units, you're the next largest size within the total amount of units out there and fleet size out there. And that tells me that small vocational fleets make up a huge, huge portion of our industry. When you look at how fleets are constructed, like what they're focused on, what work that they do, I found it interesting that 26% are for hire, that there's 13% are private, 18%, a full 18% is in the construction industry, and 11% are in the agricultural sector. And then from there, you also have, refuse and school buses and government, and a full 6% are owner operators. So I found these overarching numbers to be quite interesting, gives you a feel for how big the marketplace really is. But now let's get into the real meat of things. So historically, a manufacturer makes parts, that manufacturer sells to several distributors, both on the aftermarket and dealer side. And then those distributors sell to the actual people who are buying the parts and installing them on vehicles. Maybe it's an independent repair shop, a fleet with its own mechanics, or it could be a mobile repair person or an owner operator coming into the store. Now, how do people buy? Well, up until, let's say, 2020, this is how it shakes out. So according to the research done by MacKay Company, 47% of parts are purchased over the phone. And that's not really a surprise to anybody, right? You know how busy the parts counters are. 17% of people come into the store. Now, here's what's interesting. 12% of total purchases are done online through an e-commerce website. 10% of orders are emailed in. 6% are managed by a distributor and they have a deal with maybe the fleet. So what that means is that they actually send somebody out, they go to the fleet's location, they do a daily inventory, anything that was used that day, they replace, and that's all under contract. So 6% of parts purchases are done in that way. 5%. Now this kind of surprised me. 5% of purchases are done by a salesman's visit to the shop. That doesn't make any sense to me at all. With the hordes of salespeople that are going into shops every single day, interrupting the mechanics, interrupting the service managers, interrupting the independent repair shop owners, you would think that these salespeople would be selling more products, but only 5% of purchases are made directly from that salesperson. And then a lowly 1% are still faxed in. So we've still got some holdouts, and I bet you those people are listening to AM radio. I found these statistics to be absolutely fascinating. And I really do think it's an excellent reflection of where we are right now in the way people buy. But here's the thing. 2020, in my opinion, is a pivotal year. It's a year that the heavy duty parts and trucking industry start to catch up with all the other industries. And I think that when you look at the polls that MacKay Company will do over the next few years, I think that 12% of e-commerce purchases is going to skyrocket. Now, one of the things I've talked about on the show many, many times is really demographics. And according to GENALPHA, I found the way that they showed the curve of demographics to be very telling. So basically, if you start at the Gen Z, the youngest generation, 4.7% of the population is made up of that 16 to 19-year-old. So like my daughter and her boyfriend, they're both 16. They're both just looking for part-time jobs for the first time right now. Now, 14.6% are in that 20 to 24. These people are the people that either are in school or just getting out of school and are entering the workforce in a serious way. And then from there, you have 25 to 29, all the way up to 40 to 44. Now, this is the millennial generation. And for the first time ever, I turned 40 this year. I see myself in the millennial. So I'm actually an old millennial. I thought I was a young Generation X, but apparently I'm an old millennial. Anyway, 17.6, 25 to 29, 18.9, 30 to 34, 19.1, 35 to 39, and 18.4% of the population, 40 to 44. These are the millennials. And then from there, you have Gen X, which is 45 to 60, to 59. And then you have the boomers, which is 60 and on. Still, a large percentage of the people working in our industry are in that boomer category, a full 12.8% in the 60 to 64 range, 7.5% in 65 to 69, and 3.7% 70 to 74. So a shout out to Hank Fisher. He's the branch manager over at Arctic Truck Parts in Edson, 70 years old this year. But here's the crazy part. We still have 2.1% of the people in our industry working at age 75 to 79. People are staying in the industry for a long, long time. And that can explain why the heavy duty industry has not necessarily kept pace with the rest of the world with e-commerce. But here's the thing. Millennials, they're a large group, and they are now taking over senior leadership positions in the industry. And people my age and younger, we don't mind technology. We, in fact, prefer it. And Gen Z, oh my goodness, they have never lived where there wasn't smartphones, there wasn't the internet, and never mind internet, but high-speed internet. They will not accept the way we did things in the past. So I think that this demographic shift that we're going through is going to be one of the things that makes the next 10 years very, very difficult for the industry, because we are going to lose, people with decades of experience. But the younger generations, they are going to not only want to take over those senior positions, but they're going to want to transform the way businesses operate. And that is where we're going to see this large adoption of e-commerce. Now, what's really important to someone who uses an e-commerce site? Well, MacKay Company put forth a few things. When people are buying parts online, they want convenience. 88% of respondents said convenience was what they were after. They said it saves them time, that it saves them money, that it allows them to see the parts and availability without having to phone anyone, that they can track their orders and find out where they, the shipping status very easily, that they can access their parts all in one place. So how many times have you heard people say, right? We're so-and-so aftermarket distributor, and we are a one-stop shop for people who buy heavy-duty parts. So those are the things that are really important to people who use e-commerce and when they buy parts online. But interestingly enough, when you look at user experience, cross-reference information was the most important thing that respondents to these surveys that MacKay Company did. That's what they said was important. So truckpartscross.com, you're going to see a lot more of truckpartscross.com in the industry. And the reason why is because the folks over at Diesel Laptops are making this available. And now you're going to see this kind of be everywhere, because cross-reference information is extremely important. And that makes sense, right? If you're going to not call someone on a counter and get them to identify the part, you've got to be able to be really confident that you can identify the correct part, and it has to be easy. Now, I find it interesting because they list a bunch of other things like detailed pictures, on-hand quantities, things like that. But down the list, not too far, but down the list is search for part number by VIN. And a large portion of respondents put this as a very high priority on an e-commerce site. Basically being able to put the VIN of your truck in and be able to identify the part. Well, unless the truck OEs completely change their stand on this in the next 10 years, which they might, but unless they do, it's doubtful that you're going to be able to go onto an e-commerce site, throw in your VIN, and get the part that you need. I just don't see that happening in the next couple of years. But the folks over at Diesel Laptops are making truckpartslookup.com, which allows you to look up parts without a VIN. Now can you see why I'm so involved with the Diesel Laptops parts platform? This is why I quit my job back in December at Arctic. I went to work for Diesel Laptops, on a contract basis to work in their parts division as their sales manager. I did this because I really believe in what they're building, and what they're building is going to be part of changing the industry and making e-commerce actually viable in our industry. It's very, very exciting. The webinar overall was really, really well done. And there was a quote that the CEO and president of GenAlpha talked about. This person, Forrester, said, each time a consumer is exposed to an improved digital experience, their expectations for all experiences are reset to a new, higher level. I think that's true. And I think that with COVID and the pandemic, we've seen a big jump in people using e-commerce, and people who traditionally didn't use e-commerce in the past have now started to use it because they were forced to. But what happens when you use it and you figure it out? It's not so scary anymore. Next time you need something, you might be more willing to use an e-commerce option. So as e-commerce platforms continue to roll out, and our friends over at truckpartsinventory.com, the parent company of that website, Truck Part Solutions, the founder and CEO, Scott Tates, is developing a lot of great solutions for people in e-commerce within his group. And we're seeing this happen with companies like GenAlpha, Diesel Laptops. I mean, e-commerce is going to be everywhere, and it's going to be prolific very, very soon. And the experience that people have with it is going to get better and better and better over the next few years. So if you're in the parts game, if you're buying parts, this is good news for you. All the power is going to be shifted over to you. But if you're selling parts, this might not be such good news for you because your business model may be predicated on the old traditional model where you still rely on people phoning in their orders or coming to the counter or sending you emails, or that measly 5% from salespeople. You've got to adapt. There is a tsunami of disruption coming towards us. The water has gone out. The signs are there that the tsunami wave is coming. Now, do you want to be on the beach with your head in the sand and hoping that you're going to survive? Or do you want to be up high on solid ground with a good business plan that's going to help you transition this tumultuous time that we're living in? Well, I hope it's the latter. And if that's something that you would like some help with, I am available. You can reach out to me on my website, jamieirvin.ca. And while you're there, why don't you subscribe to the Heavy Duty Parts Report? Thanks for tuning into this live broadcast, and we'll talk to you very, very soon. You can watch our next video, and don't forget, subscribe to the YouTube channel.